Welcome. I'm Lauren Barrick, and I'm going to be moderating today, although you're going to hopefully hear very little from me and mostly from these four fantastic people up here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sylvia Simons. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I just have to say, you all must be really committed to Pathways to be here on day 2, afternoon session. So if we can just harness the commitment in this room, I think we're going to be okay. I've been at the foundation a little over a year. Previous to that, I was at Arizona State University. At the foundation, I sit on a team we call Pathways, and that is really kind of in between our K-12 team and our post-secondary team, and we are very focused on ensuring that learners have all the support that they need to successfully transition into higher education. Really looking forward to being here with you today.
Hello, I'm an entrepreneur who fell his way into education, realized that there were new ways to potentially approach connecting educators, students, and entrepreneurs, somehow convince a school board and a superintendent to let us try some new things, and what has resulted is a global network, 100 school programs, about 14,000 students engaging in what we call profession-based learning. So think of students as consultants to the business and nonprofit community, working in areas, industries that they feel are interesting to them, the ability to try things out and rule things out and pivot, and along the way learning key life skills, durable skills. So my hope today is to tell you a number of stories of things that students and business partners are doing, and to give you tactical guidance if it's helpful.
Hey everybody, good to be with you today. My name is Aaron, and I lead a local New Orleans organization called Uncommon Construction. We host an apprenticeship program for high school students. We take young people from different schools around the city. They're paid and they earn school credit for building a house together. We sell the house and match their paychecks with a scholarship. We're deepening our impact here in New Orleans, so excited to share a little bit about how we are differentiating our programs across multiple different disciplines. And we've also, over the last year, expanded to our first additional city in Minneapolis. So we're sort of on the cusp of a little more growth. So we'd love to chat with anybody during, after, about what it's like to sort of be, a local-based organization that's responding to a community need, but for problems that are sort of ubiquitous in communities across the country, and how we're trying to stack ourselves up to be part of that conversation.
All right, well, thank you guys. So we're going to hear a little bit about each of these models today, and we're going to start first with the early college model, which is a model it can result in students coming out of those programs with an associate's degree, other kinds of kind of credentialed learning, and it dates back to the 1960s to Bard College. I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with it. I'm very familiar with it. I live in a neighborhood where there actually is such a program in my neighborhood. And Bard College is in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been heavily involved in this model since dating back to about 2002. They started off with about, I think, just shy of $30 million in grants into that. And the foundation is now starting kind of there's a new program that I really want to hear a little bit about from you, Sylvia, the Accelerated Ed. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what this shift is and how it's changing and where you guys are going with that.
Absolutely, thank you. So, as we all know, for many students, their pathway after high school to college and career is very uncertain. I don't know if you all were in the plenary this morning, but a statistic I wrote down was that 65% of high school grads say they don't feel ready to make decisions about college or career. And this is a story we're all very familiar with, especially during the pandemic. I don't even know if we can say post-pandemic, but it's definitely something that resonates with me and probably many of us in this room. We've also seen that direct to college enrollment from high school has declined, and that's especially true for Black, Latino, Indigenous, and students from low-income backgrounds. So these students face, all students face many speed bumps, roadblocks, detours in achieving their goals. And so we're really interested in thinking about all the new ways that our partners are engaging in order to try and make these transitions easier for students, for their families, so that they can achieve their goals post high school. So working with partners across the country, we've launched an initiative called Accelerate Ed. And so we launched last March with 12 communities really all over the United States, places like California, Ohio, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Louisiana, New York. So really representing many communities, rural, suburban, urban communities across the country. And we're seeking to ensure that Black, Latino, and students from low-income backgrounds have the support that they need via wraparound supports, via an opportunity to pursue accelerated dual enrollment pathways, that they have the transition support so that they can achieve a higher education, an AA degree, an associate's degree, just 1 year after high school. And so these communities are working across a variety of industries with post-secondary partners, with youth-serving organizations, and really, hoping that they are able to make the best use of the enabling conditions in their communities, whether that's funding or policies that are favorable to this work, and also take into account the in-demand jobs that are relevant in their communities. So that students are able to participate in work-based learning and other experiences that really help them to see what the potential is, what the opportunities are for economic mobility, and really to find meaning for themselves while they're still in high school and as they transition into higher education. So that's just a little bit about Accelerate Ed, and we're looking to expand, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the conversation.
Yeah, I'd just like to, I'd like to hear, I know it's really new, I know you guys just launched, but can you talk a little bit about what sort of successes you've already seen, or even some challenges that have had maybe that you guys are retooling?
Absolutely. So as I stated, we launched last March, and those 12 communities participated in a 9-month design sprint. And so they received technical assistance. Our partner in this work is Education Strategy Group, and they brought together experts, other folks that are engaged in this work so that communities could ask questions, could really dig into the good, the bad, and the ugly, those challenges, those opportunities, what are things that are working well, what are some common challenges across different communities. So there was a lot of cross-site consultancies, there was a great community of practice. Those 12 communities are working on and have launched 40 different pathways in industries like healthcare, education, IT, advanced manufacturing. So really a variety of different pathways and careers and opportunities for students. And all of those were selected on the basis that those are in-demand careers within the local communities. So every single one of the 12, they had some common ones, but they really did the work to figure out, where are the opportunities in our community, where are the gaps, what are industry telling us, where we're gonna need more workforce, and how do we align those opportunities with student interests. Some of the challenges that we're seeing, there are many, that our communities were working on during the accelerator. So for example, fitting in these college courses during the school day was definitely a challenge. Our K-12 partners refer to that as the master schedule. And I heard a snicker, so I think that says a lot for those who are in K-12. As well as ensuring that, for example, a learner has an opportunity to get credit for their college, their dual enrollment course, and have that count toward their high school degree. That in some communities, that's like a no-brainer, right? But in some places, there is not alignment. And so that is something that folks are trying to work through and see where communities have advanced so that a learner is able to maximize their time and get credit for both high school graduation as well as their college course. And then, more generally, there is definitely a need for qualified instructors. And so in different communities, community colleges are teaching the dual enrollment courses. In other communities, community colleges are sort of anointing high school teachers to be able to teach those courses. And sometimes, that's easier said than done. So qualified instructors is definitely another thing that was something that teams were thinking about. And then, when it comes to work-based learning, I'm really excited to hear from my colleagues here because that is something that students are really interested in, but it can be difficult to scale. So, we had some communities that were working with their workforce partner, and they might be able to have some internships, but maybe it was only for 10 students. And the community was interested in hosting 100 students. And how do we make sure that all the students that are interested have a chance, have that opportunity, because we know that work-based learning is so meaningful and so impactful for students.
Thank you. So I'm glad you talked about work-based learning because we're going to talk about that next. Work-based learning is something that students are definitely interested in. We have some statistics that we know from ASA that 79% of high school students want to have that opportunity, but only about 34% can find them, and only 2% of high school students seem to be even taking part or getting into an internship. So Jonathan, founder, CEO of Rooted Schools, you saw a need to create some opportunities like this, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what that need was, why you felt you needed to start Rooted Schools, and what are you guys doing?
So I'm a first-generation college graduate from California. Decided to do a program called Teach for America here in New Orleans. Taught at a school called KIPP. I was a founding 8th grade teacher there. One of my teammates actually is in the room over there. And my life changed when I met a young man named Ricky. He was 16 in the 8th grade. By that time, he closed a 4-year learning gap in reading and math. And he worked hard because he wanted to become the first person in his family to make it to and through college like I did, because coming from backgrounds like his and mine, college was seen as this ticket out. Ricky was poor, and to make ends meet, started selling drugs over the course of his 8th grade year. In the spring of his 8th grade year, he was murdered during this by a classmate who I also taught. We were at his funeral and we learned, based on his ACT projections, he was on track to receive something called TOPS in Louisiana, which is a heavily subsidized scholarship to college. And so had he lived, Ricky might have had a very feasible path to free college. That experience changed my life. And not because it was Ricky, but because of all the lived experiences that I had gone through up to that point, losing family members for the same reasons. Also encountering being a teacher, also staring a tale of two cities in New Orleans, where frankly, there's a $40,000 annual household income gap between the average white household in this city compared to the average black household in this city. And I wanted to explore what might be possible to narrow, reduce, perhaps close that gap in my students' lifetimes, perhaps mine. And it just so happened that a few years after that experience, some data came out around New Orleans becoming a Silicon Bayou, where the community was projecting it would add thousands of family-sustaining jobs across several high-growth, high-wage industries that didn't require a 4-year college degree, but something more than a high school diploma. And these jobs would pay well above a living wage. And so I started wondering, what could we do to not only put more young people on a path to college and live that story out, but also perhaps put them on a path to these opportunities a lot earlier in their lives, and perhaps get money in their hands a lot earlier, so that things like Ricky don't continue to happen in our communities. And so my answer was Rooted. And the sort of long story short of what we try to do at Rooted is we operate on a very clear thesis, which is we can improve economic mobility a lot faster in our communities if we get money into young people's hands a lot sooner in their lives. And that is leaning on a lot of Jim Heckman's work, Raj Chetty's work, a lot of those folks. And the way that we go about doing it, there's about 3 pillars of the model, but one that I think is pertinent for this conversation is exposure to industry-based credentials. And so as core to the DNA of the model, Students have to earn at least one industry-based credential in a high-growth, high-wage industry by the time that they graduate the school, with a majority of our students earning more by the time they're graduating from the school. Secondarily, we have introduced dual credit attainment while students are in college. This is not uncommon across the country, but I think of note, we got students just this year alone, around 150 college credits, over $100,000 in savings for our students' families, and we think that is propellant to upward mobility faster. All this to say that we think there's something to be had around this idea of industry-based credential attainment, this dual credit opportunity, a lot of the engagement work we do around with employers, and I'm happy to talk about if that's of interest, to again be a propellant to this idea of maybe in 4 years they can get not only college acceptance in one hand, but a job offer in the other.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. I would like to hear a little bit about how you guys are kind of connecting over to employers and how you're getting them interested in the models working. You guys are expanding, from what I understand. You have 2 schools now. There's 2 more projected to come the next year, right? By this fall, I think.
So the first school opened here in New Orleans in 2017. Second school in Indianapolis in 2020. Our third school is opening in Vancouver, Washington, near where I live now, in 2 months. And then Las Vegas next year. And it's been really fascinating to interact with employers, intermediaries, philanthropic partners, et cetera, across communities. And there seem to be sort of 2 programs that stick. One is sort of within the 4-year time horizon. So we have something we call an industry advisory council. This is pretty common practice amongst what I think successful K-12 programs, where we have an advisory body ancillary to a board that's composed of employer partners, workforce intermediaries, in some cases philanthropic partners. I sit on some of those boards, but that's where the work really happens, where we set strategic direction around career and technical education programming at the school level. And so we're approving not only the courses that the school provide, but also the industry recognized credentials that employers at the table are certifying. And we take into account labor market data as we're making those decisions, as well as what we're learning on the ground with our other schools. The other program that sort of exists outside of that, that I think is actually more scalable beyond our schools, we call it the Green Balloon Fellowship. It's a program we've piloted and have been running for a few years here in New Orleans, where it's a 1-year placement at a company in a high-growth, high-wage industry. We've placed more than 20 fellows so far in, they're making more than a living wage in industries like healthcare, energy, advanced additive manufacturing, and IT, and in some cases doubling their household income as 18-year-olds and contributing to the family in that way. I was just bowling with one of our alums last night, and she's working at Oxner for a 2nd year as an IT support specialist, and she just moved into her first apartment as an adult and is freaking out over the bills that she has to pay, like I do. And so we've seen very tangibly the impact of having that kind of money at that stage and navigating that at 20 in her case. But the Green Balloon Fellowship has been important. A challenge we navigate with that is employers kind of are scared at the idea of hiring someone immediately after high school. I think there's a prevailing mainstream conception that if you can do the job, you shouldn't necessarily get the job. That there are some other barriers that we tend to have in the milieu, and that's just been challenging to navigate.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. So we're going to talk a little bit now about a different model. We're talking about work-based learning outside of classrooms, and we're going to go to Corey and Aaron. But Corey, I'm going to start with you, CAPS Network. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you're linking employers into CAPS Network, and also just give people just a little bit of understanding of where the difference is here in this model.
Absolutely. Well, employers are the lifeblood, and I want to talk about this a little bit differently. I'm going to do it through a story, because I think this story, one that in particular that I'm thinking of as we've been sitting up here, gives you a real sense for how this can work and how students get connected to employers, employers get connected to students, and how in a roundabout way you actually get to really interesting post-secondary and dual credit. So I'm going to tell you the story of Lila. Lila is a student in Kansas City. A few years back, she decided she wanted to be a part of the CAPS program and spend half of her high school day in a space that didn't feel like school, working with industry partners and exploring future careers. She decided to come to CAPS, interestingly enough, because she just was tired of the traditional high school. She had no sense of what she wanted to do. She had no sense of what career makes sense for her. She ended up taking a class called Future of Food, because she thought, at the end of the day, if I learn how to, do a few things in a culinary sense, that I could use that in my home life. And she got there and realized this wasn't a culinary class. This was a food science meets business meets entrepreneurship class. And she absolutely, out of no understanding of what she was getting into, fell in love with food science. And in her process, I will never forget this story. The final product and the presentation, each student in that class has to make a new commercializable food product. They have to brainstorm something that is a need, something that would be interesting. They have to research and make sure it doesn't currently exist. And then they have to actually formulate every part of the food and then package it, create a business plan, and present it to a Shark Tank of food executives. Lila created Lila's ice cream sandwich, and it was gluten-free because she had a gluten-free, and she goes, I'm gluten-free, I'm an athlete, there's not enough sweet treats for us. It's not fair. I'm sure we can do it. I can do it. I can make it. So she formulated the cookies, gluten-free, got the recipe right, took a number of iterations. She was all ready. She thought she had it done. She said, oh, great, Mr. Whalen, I'm going to go buy some Blue Bunny ice cream, smack this thing together, and we're good to go. And he goes, no, you're not. What do you mean? Well, have you talked to Blue Bunny? Do you have the rights to use Blue Bunny ice cream? No. Then I think you better go over to K-State Olathe and work with the food scientists and figure out how to formulate your own recipe of ice cream. So, oh gosh, okay, so she does that. She gets it all together, she packages it up. She realizes on the day of the Shark Tank that she does not have it in any kind of packaging to look professional. She races up to where the media students are located, talks to one of her friends and says, can you help me create a logo and a food label? I've got all the ingredients here. And is there any way to package this up so it looks like a real thing? And her friend, within 30 minutes, fired out a logo, put the wrapping around it, set it up, boom, here we go. She goes into the Shark Tank, she presents, food executives are in love with this thing. They're pinging her left and right about it. That night, there were a couple of ice cream sandwiches left over. The principal of the school, his wife, is gluten-free. He goes, I'm gonna take these Lila's ice cream sandwiches home, give them to my wife. Takes them home, she's not there, puts them in the freezer, goes away. Wife comes home, opens the freezer, gets one out, eats it, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Gets in her car, drives to Whole Foods. I can't find Lila's ice cream sandwiches. Ma'am, I promise you we don't have them in stock. You come back this time next week, we'll have them. I come back the next morning and tell Lila she better start cranking. But through that, she ended up going to Kansas State. She got credit for her experience in food science. She advocated for herself to work as an intern in Washington, D.C. as part of her freshman year, which is unheard of. Ended up working on the Hill in food and agriculture policy as an undergrad. And now she's a food science professional at the age of 23, 24. So that's the interplay, and that's what we're interested in, is those organic, curiosity-driven connections that students can make.
They also to me seem like real-world business problems, right? We're talking about real-world learning. This is a very big important area right now, obviously. And why real-world? Why in that? And why? I don't want to say interdisciplinary, but you're really kind of in-house, providing ways for students to not just like solve one problem, they can connect to their classmates and solve another. Why that link up?
Well, and I want to get Aaron into this
No,
conversation too. He's being very patient.
You're going to be Aaron, jump in.
Our staff
go ahead.
is happy that I'm not like just talking everybody's ear off.
I'll give a quick answer, and then I want Aaron to chime in because I'm really curious to learn more about his model. Love what I've learned so far. Kids can see fake a mile away. And project-based learning, when that kind of got into the fold, like, that is a huge step forward from what I knew when I was in high school. A lot of times, though, project-based learning can lack the authenticity, right? This is a simulation. This is something maybe you're coming up with, which is great, right? Like, as a student or a team, you can come up with something. But when you insert the authentic, when you ask a business partner, and this is something I would encourage you to do, go ask the partners in your community, what's the 10th thing on your to-do list right now? You're never gonna get to it. It's not mission critical, but it's on your list for a reason. Why not hand it off to some exuberant young people who wanna do something real and let them hack away at it, and they can be your consultant. That makes it a great project. That makes for great curriculum. That makes for great learning. And the engagement goes through the roof when there's authentic, real-world application. That's why. Aaron, over to you.
All right, Aaron. So Aaron, we're going to hear certainly real-world learning here, uncommon construction. Maybe you can talk a little bit about why construction, why that area, and what you guys are, how you're specifically also linking up with employers to bring students into that.
Yeah, so hi everybody, this is what I sound like when I talk. So why construction for me, that's what I know, right? So it's kind of a little bit, or a lot wrapped up in my journey and my experience, my personal and professional life. So very briefly, I'm from North County, San Diego. I went to college right after high school. My dad's a doctor, my mom's a teacher, my brother's a journalist. Everybody except me has postgraduate degrees, right? When it was time for me to go to college, it was never a question of whether or not, just where. Right? So I went to the public university that was the furthest away from my parents' front door, and when I dropped out in my third year, not because I was messing around or anything like that, because I was going to graduate early, and I was terrified by not knowing what I was going to do next. I also had the privilege of doing that debt-free. And that's really important in my story and my journey and the way that I connect with the problems and challenges in our communities. Later that year, so that was January 2005, later that year after Hurricane Katrina, I called the Red Cross to make a $25 donation, and I ended up here as a volunteer. I was here for as long as the Red Cross would keep me. I mention that because it's sort of my catalyzing experience that got me on this non-college alternative type of break the mold, shirk expectation kind of thing. At that time, I was a 21-year-old college dropout, personally responsible for giving out tens of thousands of dollars of free stuff every day for one of the largest international corporations in the world, happens to be a nonprofit in the Red Cross, but giving things people who needed it really badly. And nobody ever asked me whether I had a degree that qualified me for that. I was just the person who was working hard to try and do it, right? And so that was really motivating for me. Later that year, when the Red Cross was done with me, I got my first job in construction as a day laborer. If you're not familiar with this, you go into the place, write your name on the list, they send you out to work. That also was pretty far in terms of an experience from my parents' front door, where I grew up in North County, San Diego. And I learned to embrace and love this type of work, working with my brain and my body at the same time, learning things that my friends who were finishing their college degrees think is like magic, because they, have never held an impact driver before, or know what end of the hammer to use, or whatever, right? And I just really liked that I was working outside. I was meeting interesting people, and I was, as I say, there's more math, reading, science, engineering, and social skills in a day on a construction site than most jobs experience all year. And that can be really exciting. You said kids see through fake all the time. Like, there's nothing more real than being out there and seeing the result of your labor. And then seeing the result of your labor being valued and appreciated by other people. In our instance at Uncommon, through, aside from maybe a 4-year college degree, the largest single expense that they'll have in their entire life in the form of a 30-year mortgage. Right? So when our young people finish building a house and it's listed for sale 2 weeks from now, the one that we built this school year will be listed in 2 weeks here in New Orleans, and someone or multiple people will place an offer, buy it, live in it, start a family there, and then our kids can come back and see it. We've got a street in New Orleans we built 3 houses on. They all sold open in the market in under 90 days, right? Competitively against other builders. So you think about that and what that communicates about youth power and agency in the industry, not an industry, the industry that makes up the backbone of the American economy, an often derided industry. During the pandemic, there were 3 classes of essential workers: healthcare professionals, emergency responders, construction workers, right? You have a different relationship with your nurses and your bartenders than you do with the people who create traffic on your morning commute, right? And so we're thinking about how do we elevate the status of these high-wage, in-demand jobs. When I left Reno, Nevada, where I was a day laborer, I'd saved up $15,000 tucked in my boots on my way out of town because I had worked my way up to a prevailing wage job, earning $35 an hour overtime after 8, et cetera, et cetera. I was able to take that into an experience working for Habitat for Humanity here in New Orleans, where I got really good at building houses with unskilled labor. Realized I had a knack for teaching people. Wandered into Tulane University and said, hey, I've got an AmeriCorps Education Award to spend. Do you guys have Spanish classes? Like, looking for some practical skills, not seeking to finish my degree. And when I told my dad that I was going to go back to college or start taking classes at Tulane, his reaction was, well, why are you going to do that? And so they've been along with me on the journey, right? But the way that we transform all these mindsets takes time, it takes exposure. And there's been a decades-long marketing campaign against echoing Mike Rowe, against work or whatever, right? Whether it's the absence of shop class or our version of shop class on steroids that puts money in young people's pockets a little bit earlier, removes financial, social barriers of access to opportunities and resources. So, there's a lot of reasons why construction. There's an abundance of jobs. There's a diversity of jobs. There are desk jobs, there are college jobs, there are job site jobs, there are driving jobs, there are operator jobs. So we have a really unique opportunity to introduce young people to something different. I have an 18-month-old daughter, and she loves tractors and trucks and whatever, right? When I was a kid and there was a residential housing construction boom in North County, I would bust out of my parents' back door and climb around on all these tractors, but nobody ever thought to harness that curiosity for a kid like me, right? Who was maybe on a different type of track. I'm grateful for my journey, but I also was at risk in that I dropped out of college. I also was at risk in that I missed opportunities to follow my own curiosity. So we're trying to bring that into the school through our alternative learning environment that gets young people hands-on. Not that screens are bad, right? Like I'm wearing a shirt that has a construction software logo on it. Like there are jobs, tech jobs and office jobs and desk jobs, but we really need to get kids excited about it. And a lot of that's true if you even just look at like nonprofit workforce development marketing materials. 9 out of 10 times the picture is of someone learning a construction skill. It's not of them learning how to write AI code or JavaScript or whatever, right? And so let's lean into that. Let's lift it up and celebrate it. So that's like my why construction. I think the value proposition we present to young people is really unique and just meets them where they are and where their curiosity is, and seeks to transform, like not, keep those opportunities hidden from them in favor of some romanticized 21st century AI vision, but really think about what are the opportunities in your community, formal and informal economy, so you can get work from your neighbors, mowing their lawn, fixing their fence, whatever. It brings it a lot closer to them in terms of like their ability to be entrepreneurial in starting a business or working for themselves or being industrious in that way.
Thank you. So I think I'm going to start asking you guys, so you can all hop in here. We've heard a lot about these different models. You guys are each doing something and involved in different, like, unique things here. Accelerated learning, work-based learning, credentialed learning. I'd like to hear from any of you if you think that all of these models can exist in a high school space, all of them
Yes.
together.
I mean, why not? I'll start because I get passionate about this. We believe in what we're doing with CAPS and CAPS Network. We love the model that we have. We love mainly because it's empowered locally and these people are doing amazing things. I'm just the chief cheerleader, right? I get to be up here, I get to share the stories. But their work should be held up. That said, that's not why we're doing it. We're not doing it to build a brand. We're doing this to aid and I was about to say aid and abet. It sounded like I was going to be funneling OJ down the freeway or something. To aid the movement, to help propel the movement. Students, should, regardless of where they are on the planet, should have the opportunity to engage in authentic learning connected to professionals and their community. Period, full stop. And no one brand's going to do that alone. So we need the network of networks. And that means in some places you're going to have multiple brands working all together in an area. We have, as an example, there's a district in the state of Washington. They have a big picture school. They run the CAPS model out of 3 of their high schools. They're doing a lot of other really interesting things. That's awesome. Like, you know, you can take and pick and choose. And yeah, so the short answer is yes. There's no reason why they can't.
And yeah, I totally agree with that, Corey. And there is significant pressure on high schools and other K-12 institutions to perform. And if you do not perform, and again, perform is a very, I'll just, for lack of a better word, say traditional conception of that. So your ACTs, average ACT score is at a certain level, your, or ACT, your college placement is at a certain level. Oh, you're starting to send kids to career and college. Oh, like, you know, that, once you start troubling the waters there, depending on who that stakeholder is, it could whip you into shape, in a very different type of shape. We definitely have felt that pressure as we lean more into this space, whether it be by philanthropic partners or authorizers. And so I think that that's just a very real concern that our K-12 peers face. Just as one example, in New Orleans, we're one of the only high schools offering students, well, we're one of the only high schools located on a college campus and offering the dual enrollment opportunity, but also offering industry-based credentials, and a variety of them, a lot of them across the city have decided to forego that because post-pandemic, they were getting a lot of pressure to accelerate learning and also get state standardized test scores up to a certain level, largely for optical reasons, not necessarily for the larger social impact reasons and economic mobility reasons that we're talking about today.
When you're talking about pressure, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, and it's not just on K-12 shoulders by themselves. So a critical part of the work of Accelerate Ed and the 12 communities that we started with was that they developed design teams that were composed of K-12, higher education, employers, youth-serving organizations working together in concert, because it really, everyone has a role to play. And plus there are other actors that have a role, including philanthropy, including state and local governments. And all of them together is really what's making the difference. So one example I'll share is in Arizona, my home state. The Greater Phoenix Chamber was leading the team. And they were working with their K-12 partners, Mesa Public Schools, Phoenix Union, their higher ed partner at Maricopa Community Colleges, to develop pathways that are focused on advanced manufacturing. And they were bringing in local business partners, including Boeing and Intel and others, because advanced manufacturing is one of the highest growing industries in Arizona. And so all of these folks working together were really focusing on creating, these pathways, on really contributing in meaningful ways. So for example, the business partners contributed space, they contributed materials, they contributed machines, and even faculty for these programs, because although advanced manufacturing is growing in Arizona, a lot of those folks are working in industry and not necessarily teaching at community college or at the universities. And so it's really working together in concert that is really making the difference in different communities. So it's not just on the shoulders of K-12.
And that question, to build on that, of whether all of these solutions have a place in one school or multiple schools or whatever, I think we would emphatically say yes, in that what really matters is the opportunity to explore, and for young people to find out what they like and what they're good at. And so presenting them with an abundance of options and opportunities is really, really important. And I believe that often gets lost in conversations around scale, around replicability, around credentials. It's our point of view in many ways that those can be self-limiting or can be prescriptive. So at Uncommon, we don't do industry credentials, right? We think they're great. I think the industry has great mechanisms to provide that formal credential and training. We also know that those were designed for people who have already gotten a few years of experience, right? We believe really strongly in that, work-based learning experience, that resume experience, that a young person shouldn't be conscripted at the age of 15 into one path or another along some of those European models that I've heard talked about at this conference as well. We need a little bit more of that flexibility for young people to shift and move and figure out where they land and where they really want to be and where they can thrive. And sometimes we don't always make that decision. I don't have the same job I had when I was 18, and I'm sure nobody else on this panel does either, right?
And you guys have an interesting, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to just quickly, you have an interesting way of like telegraphing a rubric of how they're learning these skills that
Yeah, totally. So we, amidst an abundance of credentials, a statistic I heard was like there's 1 million credentials and 60,000 providers, and how do you know which ones of them are good, right? So we don't do, in our industry, for these safety-sensitive positions, it's NCCER. A lot of you, if you work in this field, are probably familiar with that. Right as we were digging into that research and starting Uncommon, we're like, okay, well, in our industry, it's actually not these credentials at the high school level that's going to be transformational for a young person. It doesn't change their pay right out of high school. It's the time on the job site that changes their pay. It's the experience that does, right? So what we've done is sort of dispensed with those credentials in favor of a soft skills, durable skills framework that's from a research-based study in Chicago that assessed the landscape of thousands of employers across every industry to find these more universally applicable skills. And these are 12 higher ability skills. And so we use that tool every month with your paycheck. Our young people are receiving performance evaluations. And when you score skilled or expert in corresponding categories 2 paychecks in a row, you earn a badge for your hard hat. This replicates an industry practice where when you go through a safety certification or work on a certain job, you get that sticker as well. Then when and how we engage with our industry partners, if they come for a job site visit or a full day partner build, they can scan the job site, see which of our apprentices have earned what badges, and then come up to us at the end of the day and say, hey, Brianna, when so-and-so is ready to graduate, send them over to us. We can have honest conversations when we're doing that matchmaking in a more intentional way around what skills and experience this young person is bringing. So we're trying to do that in a strengths-based, affirming way, lots of high fives, lots of music, all that stuff on our job sites, in a way that's accessible and celebratory for our young people. And we're hoping that that becomes contagious so that the industry as it exists today can start developing and integrating some of these cultural components so that they can be in a better position to welcome and embrace a younger and more diverse workforce.
We can absolutely change the definition of what success looks like. Just to tag off that, I love what you're doing. This last semester, every semester we do a competence survey with our students. We had over 3,000 responses to this competence survey across our network. And these are the skills that employers are telling us they want, right? But it's a factor of, we have to stop thinking just about traditional academic performance majors, which can be hard systematically, right, to buck that. But the end result is you're providing students with language and experiences that they can match up to then tell their story.
All right, well, I want to thank you guys so much because I learned a ton, and I'm probably going to go back and want to write a story about all of this. So thank you so much for that. And I know we didn't have time to ask questions today, but I'm hoping you guys will stay up here if any of you have questions of these amazing people up here who are doing some incredible work. So thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for coming, and thank you guys as well.